In the office, yeah. 'Cause
Commission to the dais, please. Commission to the dais.
If I could get everyone's attention, we're not going to officially call the meeting because we don't have technically a quorum. The mayor's running behind. Unfortunately, the vice mayor had an employee who called out sick, so he wasn't able to leave his shop. And the vice mayor pro tem had a previous engagement that he's attending. So we have Commissioner Hardy and Commissioner Robinson, so not enough to have a quorum.
Previous engagement.
Who's in his usual rare form. But what we're going to go ahead and do is start showing some presentation and information just to keep things moving, but understanding that we're not in an official meeting for the budget. It's just basically some presentation of materials. And at such time as the mayor gets here, then we'll call the session into official quorum at that point. So if everyone's good with, are you gentlemen good with that?
I'm just happy that our coup has succeeded. I think this is the time for Herman and I to seize control of the police department.
This isn't.
Them surround them.
This isn't Lake Worth Survivor. So our representatives of Stantec, both Letitia and Eric, are here. Why don't you go ahead and start with the presentation, and at such time when she arrives, we'll call to order for that. So yeah, it's being recorded and broadcast. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
That is correct, Madam, Mr. City Manager.
Ooh, very officious. All right. Thank you very much. Y'all proceed, please.
All right, thank you guys very much for allowing us to be here. I'm Leticia Gaglianoni with Stantec. This is Eric. Good evening to everybody. We're just basically here to show you updated results of changes that we have made to our financial management plan based on updated FY18 forecasts and FY19 budgets provided by city staff. Before getting into the electric fund, the sanitation, the beach, and the general fund, I kind of wanted to go through our slide that discusses our proposed scope real quick, or project scope real quick. And then after each fund discussion, or after each fund presentation, I'd like to open it up for questions or discussions. And then we'll proceed from one fund to the next. So as you've already seen the slide, and you already know, Stantec has worked with your utilities and your enterprise funds to update a multi-year financial management plan annually. In this update, we have the purpose of updating customer demand and property assumptions, operating needs, capital needs. We also look to make sure that the funds comply with existing and new debt covenants, reserve targets, and policies, and we evaluate each fund's revenue sufficiency and sustainability within the planning period. The electric fund. So since the last time we met in June and we talked a little bit about the electric fund, staff has provided us with updated projected electric sales revenues based on internal staff projections. They've also provided us with updated 18 forecasts and updated 19 proposed budgets. The new purchase water projections now also include staff's anticipation or expectation based on the ongoing contract negotiations. And staff has also updated CIP. So as you've seen before, this is the slide that shows you the summary panel from our analysis. And what you're looking at is on the blue bars, you're seeing the current financial management plans with the updated numbers. And the green line is what we presented to you in June, or the green lines. So if you look at the revenue and expense chart, you'll see the projected cash in is projected to outpace cash out in 19, 20, and 21. What that does is it causes the surplus, or we use the surplus to build up fund balances. And so if you look at the operating fund chart on the upper left, the blue chart, that shows you fund balances growing from 18 to 19 to 20, and then finally to 21, where at that point, projections for fund balances hit the 3 months operating target that this fund has. As the projected cash out increases just due to inflation, and then due to future projected borrowings, the addition of debt service also pushes that cash out projection out higher than cash in at the end of the projection. This fund may end up going slightly below the 3 months target by 2026. Keep in mind that 2026 is farther and outside of the 5-year planning period. And so as we do these updates on an annual basis, we'll continue looking at these projections and refining the projections as we get closer. Sorry. No.
Oh, there's all your
Well, I figured I'd
points.
do it at the end. But you forgot what I was going. So this projection also includes no annual rate increases for the 10-year period. And the very first projected borrowing would happen in fiscal year 20.
It's important to note that this plan to remain sustainable and achieve that reserve target does rely upon the assumption that the utility will borrow funds to fund capital projects starting in fiscal year 2020. So as those capital projects come online, and you can see in those early years, those yellow bars in that bottom middle graph, that's capital projects being funded by existing debt proceeds. And beyond that, new debt proceeds are going to be required to fund that capital improvement program. So this isn't a cash funded CIP. To maintain all of the sustainable projection we're showing in here, it will require debt service issued on those funds. But we are showing debt service coverage would be adequate and quite high with the given revenues and operating costs of this fund.
We also have debt service coming off on Stan. Where's Ed? I see his head there. Okay. And this would be money on top of the 14 million plus that we currently have to invest into the transmission distribution system. So to Eric's point, there's cash that's been identified to put towards debt service. Okay, thanks. All right. Is there any questions from either of the members on the board?
Go ahead, Commissioner Harding.
Could you just go into some of the assumptions behind revenue growth?
So we have revenues that are now projected, I guess, it was about $800,000 higher than originally discussed or originally presented. And I don't know.
What's the dollar figure again?
800,000.
800,000. Okay.
Did you or
It's
Jennifer
really
want-
minimal versus the overall revenue of this fund is about 36 million.
Yeah.
But I think I may turn that over to Ed because I know some of the internal projections for this fiscal year 18 numbers are driven by staff or calculated by staff.
The last meeting we had, you actually went to a spreadsheet and showed us.
We have it.
It's there, okay. And if you
Is
could,
that-
I guess, give us a breakout of where you expect the revenue growth to come from.
And before you do that, just to explain what our model does, the revenue growth is a function of any rate increases that are programmed in there. Right now, we're showing none, plus the assumption of growth in actual customer units, plus the demand of electrical use from those customers. So all three of those components go into play into revenue growth. And as you can see here, going forward, we have growth in terms of total bill consumption of electrical, plus the actual units or meters behind each base facility charge would grow as well. It's really minimal, less than 1% a year is assumed to growth. The real difference between the first time we showed you this and now is staff's internal projection of the year-end revenues for fiscal year 18, and then their projection of what fiscal year 19's new revenues would look like. And then we project after the budget for fiscal year 19 is all the model's projection based upon the customer growth within the model.
So you expect pretty much all growth to come from unit growth because customers are basically going to be using less power over time, and you expect
So we do have that assumption.
flat rates.
On the commercial level, we have some assumption of usage per account.
Decreasing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me chime in for the record. Ed Liberty, Director of the Utility. The growth numbers were a factor of looking very closely at all of the development that we see happening that's known, both at the city, in the county, and in the village of Palm Springs, and the various stages of development that those projects are at and when we expect them to come online, both on the residential and commercial side. And then we balance that with the growth or lack of accelerated growth that we've actually seen in our numbers on a year-to-date basis when we compare to prior years. So we look at our demand and we look at our energy, import to the city and sales to customers. We look at the actual projects that we see coming online, and then we allow for the fact that an existing customer is going to be more efficient than they were 5 years ago because they're buying new devices that are more efficient, and a new customer is going to be more efficient than an older customer that was here years ago. Because new developments come on, those homes are going to be more energy efficient than the home that was there before. So the residential and commercial growth, I think, combined are around 1% in this model or so. But an area of significant growth that we have is an area of pole attachment charges and our fixed fees for customers. So that's in this model as well, right? So that stepped our revenues up as well. We're renegotiating all of our pole attachment contracts, and we're finding that in general, the telecom companies that are attached to our poles are attached to more poles than we thought, and they're paying a much lower rate than current market rates would demand. So we have those numbers in here as well. Now, we're still negotiating those numbers, those rates with the telecom providers. And at the time that this was put together, we had not yet finished the audit on the number of poles that they're attached to. So that work is coming in. As we get better numbers, we'll update this model. But our numbers in here so far, we believe to be conservative.
And Commissioner Hardy, if I could add to what Ed was mentioning too, is that I think the most important change to our assumptions have really been as it relates to the ongoing contract negotiations. I think we anticipate staff, I guess, anticipates based on the current negotiations that the purchase power cost will decline substantially. And so that's going to help this fund. And that's really the driver of this change is the cost reduction that we're anticipating will come to fruition.
Beginning January 1.
Beginning January 1. So there were a couple of factors in there in the initial runs of these models. In fiscal year 18, but also calendar year 18, we had supplemental charges under the current power purchase agreement with OUC related to the failure of GT2 last year, which triggered these supplemental charges. The combination of the supplemental charges ending at the end of calendar year 18 and a new negotiated rate with wherever that provider might be going into effect January 1 of 19 changed our cost picture substantially. That was not in the earlier models. On top of that, the earlier models also assumed some escalation. So not only were we using higher numbers than what we expect to see, but they were also being escalated. So now we're using new numbers that are representative of other deals that have been done in the market. I don't want to telegraph the deals that we're currently looking at, but the numbers that are in this model are representative of other deals done in the market recently.
Okay, all right, cool. Thank
So
you.
it gives us a better cost picture.
And that's clearly, if you look at the top right graph, you can see that red line shoots down substantially from 18 to 19. Because 18 had a bunch of
One-time items.
extraordinary one-time costs, and then the growth of costs from 19 through 21 goes down a little bit and then comes back up with in relation to what I just spoke about in terms of the new power cost negotiations. So that gap between the blue and the red line is what's going to cause you to build up your fund balance over there on the left graph up to your minimum reserve target of 3 months over the next few years and maintain it over the next few years without a projected rate increase.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question about our ordinance for rate parity. Are we considering, I know your crystal ball for FP&L is shiny or what?
Well, any of the three, we currently have 3 bidders that are competing for the business. That's what you're referring to.
Well, I'm referring to our
Oh, rate
ordinance.
parity with FPL.
Yes,
Okay.
and we have an ordinance. Are we going to continue to tout being at parity, or are we going to have to adjust some numbers somewhere?
At the moment, we're not aware of any additional rate decreases or increases that FPL would have. They may adjust their rates and we'll have to react accordingly. So at the moment, we're not forecasting any additional rate reductions nor rate increases in this budget.
Based on, and we're going to chase FP&L.
Well,
So we have an ordinance. It's like having a building without a CO.
If
I'd
I-
like to
Just for
be honest with-
clarification, yeah, the ordinance said that we had to reach rate parity by a certain date. It was over a 5-year period. We achieved that on the time that was
Once,
specified.
yes.
The ordinance was complied with. Whether or not we continue
Is that
to,
how the ordinance reads?
yes.
Okay.
So if you continue to do that, then that's a whole nother discussion. But right now, the position that the director's taken is not to raise or lower at this point. We are currently, how many cents? It's 18 cents or something? I
It's
can't remember
a
what it is.
total of, I think, 72 or 74 cents. At the end of a month, at a 1 month period, the 1,000 kilowatt hour customer, according to our mathematics, would pay, I think, 74 cents more to Lake Worth than it would have paid to FPL. The comparable,
Subject to change.
and those numbers, move slightly on a monthly basis. So we were at parity at the required, as required in the ordinance. We met that. All of the numbers that we're using recognize that whether there's an ordinance or not, we need to be able to deliver cost proper, appropriate, competitive service and reliable service to our customers.
I just don't want to tout something that isn't true.
Correct.
So if we're ready to move on, the next fund is the sanitation fund.
Talking trash.
What's going on here? It takes a second, okay. Was I supposed to move that back?
It's loading. There it goes.
All right, here we go. So, ooh, we went all the way back. All right, sanitation fund. So since the last time,
Okay.
go ahead, Commissioner.
I don't know if now's the time, but could you explain the predicament that Vero is in? Would that help me feel better about having our own utility company?
I think so. So
I hope so.
I hope so. For the benefit of yourself and the audience too, Vero had decided through a majority of their population and their commissioners to exit FMPA and sell their utility system to FPL. That was a very laborious process. Took a number of years for them to go through that effort. It was very contentious throughout the process, but they did finally make that decision. And then they had to get the unanimous consent of every single FMPA member and every single participant, as well as the bondholders in all of the projects that they were a party to. Those consents were all reached, including, I believe, favorable opinion of bond counsel that could be done.
Including us.
Including us. We did agree to that after getting some concessions on protections that we wanted, which were, to the credit of the UAB, things that the UAB insisted on. And we worked together to get that done, and that was achieved. That deal was then subsequently approved by the Florida Public Service Commission, the FPSC, and then on the eve, or as they got close to the final go, when they were actually going to sit down to sign pretty soon, there were a handful of, I want to say three or four interveners which stepped in and have basically stopped the process and requested that the FPSC rehear the case, if you will. So that has basically stopped that process in its tracks and put it back to the FPSC that's going to reconsider the application by FPL to acquire them and Vero to exit. So it's back in front of the FPSC. So it's delayed the closing a few months, is the opinion of the people who follow it closely.
And the effect, the financial effect to Vero is advantageous or not?
Well, it's hard for me to opine on it. I can tell you what the impacts would be directionally. So they will get a chunk of change for selling the asset to FPL. The vast majority of that money, and I mean the vast majority of that money, is going to go back to FMPA to repay FMPA members for the costs that they're stranding because they're leaving. So the vast majority of that will go to them. And then that will leave the city with a very, very small number. I don't know the exact splits off the top of my head, but it's significant. A very small amount goes back to the city. What the city will lose long-term, of course, is the contribution to the general fund that the utility recognized. So it's a very divisive issue in Vero Beach, as we understand it, and they're having a tough time with it. But they did have all the votes necessary to make it go, and they did go.
And they will only be paying to FP&L. They won't be getting anything from FP&L in payments.
No, that's correct. They will not be getting any cash from FPL other than what's going over to the as the ARP, FMPA to exit. There might be a small amount that they're left with. It's a very, very small amount. But they do have these significant liabilities that they have to pay off to FMPA to settle that debt, if you will.
Thank you.
Why that was important to us was we wanted to be protected from any of those liabilities coming back to us as somebody who was a member of FMPA as well.
You were apparently a good negotiator in that.
Well, again, I give a lot of credit to the UAB members who helped on that as well, so they were very helpful in that
Thank
and
you.
insistent.
Thank you.
All right, so back to the sanitation fund.
After that small detour.
Yes. Since the last time we met and talked about the sanitation fund, staff has provided us with additional, or I guess, some modifications to the future for fiscal year 19 rate adjustments. Those included reduction to residential rate of 5% and an increase of 27%. This was based on an internal analysis already made by staff. And they've also updated us with fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19, 18 forecasts and 19 proposed budgets, and provided us an updated CIP. So when all of this information was loaded into our financial management plan, we get to this, the results panel. Do you want me to stop?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Welcome, Madam Mayor. We were just listening to some interesting information, so now we have technically a quorum if you want to sort of officially convene the workshop.
Sure, I'd like to call this Thursday, August 9th, City Commission budget
didn't have a
session
pledge
to
of
order.
allegiance.
And ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo.
Here,
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso is absent. Commissioner Scott Maxwell is absent. Commissioner Omari Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Is here.
if everyone please rise for the pledge. Led by Commissioner Roberts.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Forgive my tardiness, I had let everyone know well ahead of time that I would be a little late fighting traffic, and I made it safely. Thank you, sorry.
I guess direction from you all, do you want to just keep going? Okay. So we just started talking about the sanitation fund, and what I just mentioned to everybody on the previous slide is that we've made adjustments to the projection to reflect fiscal year 18 forecasts and fiscal year 19 proposed budgets given to us by staff as well as CIP. And so now we're looking at the panel screenshot for the updated projections. And so again, the blue bars include the new projections, and then the green bars include the results that you all looked at just maybe a month and a half ago. And if you look at the revenue and expense chart, again, in fiscal years 19 through 21, you see cash in or projected cash in higher than projected cash out. And so that typically means surplus fund balances. And so you'll see the blue bars in the beginning from 19, 20, and 21 increasing on the operating fund chart on the left side, the blue chart. But then beyond fiscal year 2021, that relationship between cash in and cash out changes, reverses. And so this is due to just inflationary changes, and then this fund actually cash funds its projects, and so just projected expenses are really growing faster than your revenues because the rates are not changing. They're staying at zero throughout the projection, with the exception of the fiscal year 19 rate adjustments based on staff's inputs. And so what this does is, because your sanitation fund has fund balances that are above the 4 months target, those fund balances start getting used up to bridge up the gap between the cash in and the cash out. And so that's why you see the blue bars at the end of the projection come down closer to that black line on the operating fund. And that means they're closer to that 4 months target. One of the things that I think is important to point out is that this is out beyond the 5-year planning period. But as we look at this on an annual basis, we would look to try to understand if fiscal years, 27 and 28 might really have that large of a gap between the cash in and the cash out. Because what we don't want to do is to have to all of a sudden get to the point where your fund balance is very close or right at the target, and you have to endure one really large rate increase at the end of that projection period. So we would look at it and try to make adjustments and maybe have some minor annual rate increases prior to getting to that point where your fund balance is so close to the target it might fall below it. Those are my remarks.
Mr. Harvey?
Oh, and I keep forgetting my call outs. Whoops, sorry.
The last time Jamie gave a presentation to us, he talked about the reduction in residential rates and the increase in commercial rates. And we talked also about rates for mobile home parks. And we gave direction that basically we would continue the same type of service going door to door, but that we would ask for a fair rate for that kind of service in that area. And my question is, where do we settle on that? And is that rate that you would have charged for, this mobile home service reflected in what we see here?
For the record, Jamie Brown, Public Services Director. Yes, prior to fiscal year 2019, the mobile home parks were actually coming out of residential. So those numbers have been pulled out of the residential, and now they have their own separate rate that we're going to be moving forward with in 2019.
So what is the rate?
The rate is $23.20.
Okay.
When you break it down to per unit per month, which is an increase depending on the mobile home park, because keep in mind we have 4 parks in the city and they're all charged something different.
Yeah.
So we basically standardized all of the pricing now.
Okay.
So depending on what park you're in, I think the lowest was like $3 and the most was like $4.
So it's
23.20.
23.20.
A third rate between
Commissioner Robertson?
commercial and residential.
Correct. They fall in between residential and commercial rates. That's correct. And based on the workshop we had, the actual service would stay the same, still door to door.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Robinson, did you have some question?
That was,
That was it? Okay, thank you.
No, Joe.
Follow-up? Okay.
All right, so then the next fund that we have is, if there's no more questions on the sanitation fund,
Electric.
at the bottom.
So we're now to the third fund.
so now we're on to the beach fund. So again, since the last time we had a conversation with you all on the beach fund, we heard that there was a $1 increase to the hourly rate, and so we've now reflected that in our projections. We've got updated 18 forecasts and updated 19 proposed budgets, and an updated CIP for that fund. So again, now here's the panel for our beach fund. And the blue line, or I guess you can see on the blue line, that shows that change from $2 to $3 right on the top left, I guess, corner of the screen. And one thing that we took notice of too is that in the past we've projected growth of 2% on an annual basis. So we lowered that to 1% to kind of account for some price elasticity. It'll be interesting as we go through it on an annual basis, and as actually as we look at it next year to see what kind of variances or maybe pull back on some of the demand that, if we can get the data, may have happened due to that change. It's hard to tell because this kind of service is not like a water and sewer. It's not a basic need. It's more, I would suspect, more elastic. And so we'll have to wait and see if there's any demand adjustments that happen based on this. But we've projected a slightly lower growth. And so with the slightly lower growth and the rate adjustment, we still have cash in projected to be higher than cash out for most of the projection. When it gets closer to 2028, we've got what we call sustainability, which is essentially your cash in and your cash out are exactly the same. So your fund balance would ideally stay steady. There was no increase or a decrease to fund balances. But what happens in the short term is you build a little bit of fund balances, and then as you get to the end of the projection, those fund balances kind of stay steady. Any questions or comments on the beach fund?
In terms of parking,
Commissioner
Yes.
Robinson?
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, jeez. Let's say August 1st of last year, how did we do in numbers versus August 1st of this year? Since we raised the rate, August 1st?
It's Larry.
Larry Lakewood, Park Enforcement Manager, City of Lake Worth, just for the record. Just to answer that question, actually, we just put the meters in June, installed them. It's gonna take maybe 3 or 4 months for it to actually get all the bugs worked out of it, so we're on an even level. So we're kind of like floating in between right now, so I really don't want to put an excellent dollar figure for it. But we're kind of about where we were last year, kind of real close. Just to let you know off.
What was that?
You mean dollar wise?
I was, in terms of,
Yeah,
did
we're about
they,
about the same right now.
I'm asking whether the dollar raise affected.
Right, well,
the
we really haven't had a chance
business.
to even digest that yet, because numbers are still coming in, and we're still trying to get everything in sync.
So-
So give us a little bit of time to get to that.
November.
That's what I'm asking. Few months.
Next week.
Commissioner Hardy?
Well, okay, so now that, when he said that we're about the same, I was a little concerned. Because if you're saying that we're about the same on a dollar amount basis, then what we could expect then is a decreased number of cars parked if, the amount of dollars that we pulled in, like August of last year versus August of this year is the same and we've increased prices. But if what you're really saying is that we can't trust the numbers that we have because we're still working things out, then okay. So if, I think it would be cool if you just came back to us in a few months like you suggested with, information that's a little hardened and, more secure, to do a year-over-year comparison. I think, we'd like to see that, to see what kind of elasticity, there is, the demand there.
Commissioner Robinson?
I was at Benny's today and was told that there were vacancies available, and yet his volume was better than last year. So
I think volume's probably just slightly up still overall, but, it's just an estimated guess on my part.
I can guarantee you this summer's gonna be bigger numbers, especially with this, because it's been a less wet summer than ever before, so the
Correct.
beach, I don't
Depending
care
on
what,
weather too, don't forget everything's weather related too.
Weather is
Yeah,
totally
weather is
related to it.
totally related.
We've run some sensitivity analysis of this issue within the model, and I'd first like to say this is the most exciting I've ever seen the beach fund model look. So,
parking helps.
even though the rate was raised and we lowered the growth to 1% per year, we ran an estimate of elasticity to this to see how this projection could hold its fund balance over the 10-year period with the maximum amount of elasticity. We calculated north of 45% would be the rate. If demand dropped by 45%, you would still hold a good projection, and it doesn't sound like that would be
And it's 47, we can take another look at it.
right, and that would be a significant drop in parking attendance and revenue. So you have a lot of room to in terms of elasticity to still keep this fund whole at this spending level.
that $1 made a big difference in that.
So if I may, Lauren Bennett for the record, Assistant Director of Leisure Services. The new parking rate has only been in effect for a week. So like Larry was saying, like the data isn't all there.
What's wrong with you, Larry? It's been a week already.
That's such a Herman question.
So just a little bit of clarification. Based off of the $3 amount compared to what we would have made at $2, there is a significant difference. I don't have the hard numbers, but I mean, for the week of August 1st to the 7th, we're looking at $47,000 worth of revenue. At $2 an hour, it would have been around like $30,000 and some change.
So the difference
I hope
between
that's
30
some
and
clarification to your
47,000.
question.
But it just takes time to see everything, like month after a couple months to actually get it.
And those meters don't.
Commissioner
report
Robinson?
weather.
Yeah.
They do.
Do they? All right.
We are monitoring it on a daily process to see, if there's any type of negative reaction to the price change.
I've heard a little bit, but people were thinking that we doubled it from $1.
Yeah, I'm
$3.
seeing that out on social media.
Added $2.
Can't believe everything you read.
Like, it was $2 Commissioner Hardy?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I saw that too, and I was just amazed that something can double from 1 to 3.
1, 2, 3. That's why I had to back up what I was saying. No, but yeah, that was, I know we were very hesitant to do it, but it certainly righted that fund a great deal. Okay, and thank you, Mother Nature.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. And I'm so happy to see you smile. Eric, smile.
So now the next fund is a general fund.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Madam
yep.
Mayor.
go
Commissioner
ahead.
Hardy?
Are there any costs at all associated with the pool in this model? Okay, so like the pool is costing us nothing in its mothballed state, like we're doing no maintenance on anything at that building, basically. 0, okay. All right, thank you, that's all I had.
I have, no, it is costing us something.
We were told that it was last year, but I'm wondering if,
Well, we had water in it last year. That's what I was just
Okay,
gonna reference.
So Corinne can actually correct me if I'm wrong. We're carrying just a few of the salaries in the pool fund, and there's an insurance cost affected with the pool. But other than that, there's no other costs associated.
Yeah, that's why I was just gonna preface by saying that we had water in it, we had to keep treating the water, so that was,
What's in it this year is very minimal.
okay.
may
Commissioner
I
Hardy?
ask another question? Former employees at the pool who have shown a commitment to the city, are we making an effort to keep them with the city in some capacity?
Yeah, some of them actually transferred over to Ocean Rescue.
To Ocean, and people
Yeah.
who have not transferred over to Ocean Rescue?
Well, one of them came to City Hall, so we made our best efforts to keep them within the city because we love our employees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so now on to the general fund. So again, since the last time you all saw us, we've had updates to the 18 forecast and the 19 proposed budget in this fund. And so now when we look at this fund, we've got some cash deficits in 18 and 19. However, based on property value projections, growth, and other resources to the general fund growth, or growing, I guess, faster than cash out, that relationship changes in about 2021. And so about 2021, you start seeing cash in higher than cash out. And so your fund balance, although below that 2 months right now, will start creeping up to the fund target, and it'll get there by 2024. It actually goes a little bit above the 2 months target by 2024.
You have anything to add, City Manager?
I keep forgetting mine.
What's changed?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Well, we've been able to hone the numbers better and get all the right figures. One of the sets of issues that we wanted to see if you wanted to talk about further, and first I need to get some clarification on staff, the pension reform increase as a toggle.
So I received that from Corinne, and that is actually included in all of the scenarios we've looked
Okay.
at right now.
Okay.
Good.
Then the other component that's not included is in conversations we've had previously about the comp and class corrections.
Okay.
And we were hoping to, do you have a toggle on that?
Yes,
Okay.
we have a toggle ready in each one of the funds.
Can you
So-
explain what the comp and class corrections are?
We did a study that took, it seemed like
I
forever.
know what it is, but I just wanted to be fair.
But our goal was to put our employees' pay ranges in a pay plan that reflected the realities of the market in which we recruit and we retain employees. And when we had the results that came back along with the salary increases and things that had been approved, we still had employees who were not being paid to the minimum of the proper pay ranges. So what we asked staff to do was to, with this discussion, actually bring everybody up to that level where they should be in those ranges and what would be the impacts by fund. And in the general fund, we're looking at over a $300,000 figure, which would do comp and class, both salary and associated benefits, which would, given the current configuration of what you're seeing here in the budget, actually inflate further what we draw out of the fund balance. And I think Leticia and Eric will show you that.
Yeah, so if you look at the blue bars now, the blue bars reflect the increase or the addition of $322,000 starting in fiscal year 19. And so you can see that fund balances now are projected to go slightly lower than they were, because you can see the blue lines are a little lower than they were in 20 and 21 and 22. And then what this would do is, instead of reaching the fund balance by fiscal year 2024, you would actually wait, or I guess it would be delayed, reaching the fund balance out to fiscal year 2027, because what it does is it pushes that cash deficit out a little farther than we were originally projecting.
And I do want to just make a comment too, that for those at home that are listening and for people in the audience, it has been our goal. We've been working on getting a solid comp and class study for 6 years, maybe even a little bit longer. So I want to congratulate staff for working on that and getting this finally to us, so we have a good ability. We've worked through a lot of issues, union issues now that have been settled, that were here before I even got here. We've had a bunch of things going on, but our goal has always been to attract and retain quality staff and build a team of professionals. And that's what we've been working on this time. And to have this study, just to explain, I feel that it's so important because we've been working on it for so long, and it means a lot to our employees too. And again, we want to really, I think people have seen the changes over the years. I hope they have. But to know that our ability to do this and to be able to get salaries up through, I know in the past it's been through larger raises and smaller raises and union negotiations and all kinds of stuff, but that's the lay of the land for a municipality. But this really gives us the operation for our employees to know that they're being paid and they're valued, and it makes a lot, and it makes a difference in an operation like this. And to the end result for you, the taxpayers, the owners, the shareholders of this city, you'll see better service, you'll see more involvement, you'll see a lot of things, because we finally are getting there. And I'm very proud of all the departments and all the department heads and all the staff for putting up and going through all of this. But it's going to be a little tough in the beginning, as you can see by the numbers. But I'm very excited about this, city manager. Thank you for leading the staff and getting this done, because now when we sit down to our budget negotiations, we know that we're doing the very best that we can and making the best decisions that we can, because the numbers are real and they're up to date based on the current working conditions.
Well, Madam Mayor, we appreciate your leadership and the leadership of the board over the years, especially to get to this point. I can tell you, in the last couple of years, we've gone from consistently having probably 60 positions at one time or another open in the organization that we were having trouble trying to fill. We're down to 6 and 12, and we're not seeing the tremendous turnover. We're seeing stability. Even on my management team, for the first time, as I told you last couple of weeks ago, I have a full complement of staff, and it's just tremendous. I can feel the acceleration of getting things done. And the comp and class study, I don't want anybody to get the idea that we're shooting to be a leader in salaries in this county. That's not the point. We're trying to be in the range to be competitive in this marketplace, and I think we're comfortably in that middle range.
We'll work on it.
With this change, and I guess the question
better.
becomes, if you want to implement the change in this, it would reflect in the fund balance without any cuts to the expenses or any other kinds of anticipated revenues. You would see it would dip a little more in the fund balance to implement the rest of this.
Okay. Commissioner Hardy?
Yes. So I've got a few questions. The first is, to implement the entire thing, it's $590,000. I understand that would be split across several funds.
Yes, sir.
So we understand that if, by the way, those salary ranges that we're comparing them to don't move, which they very well might over the next few years as cities raise their other employees and the benchmark changes, then it's $300,000+ impact to the general fund if we did it all at once today. Now, my first question is, what about the other funds? Have we figured out what the impact would be, for example, to the electric fund, if we raised all the employees there who are currently underpaid to where they deserve to be? What would be the impact to the water fund, beach fund? I understand our lifeguards are grossly underpaid relative to county lifeguards. Have we figured out that impact?
So I
We
did,
increased
I
them.
The lifeguards have actually are in the proper ranges now.
Okay.
They
As
got
of last summer, they were
they got pulled into the comp and class study, so
Okay.
they're correct.
Okay.
I received estimates for each one of the funds, and so we've got them in as a toggle,
Okay, this is
but
the
give me a
electric.
second and let me load it in.
If you can just tell me the total amount for the electric that we would have to.
So the amount that I have right here is 86,243.
Okay.
And when she added that in there, and the difference between the blue and the green bars are negligible, because what it's doing is saying in those middle years of the projection, you'll need to just borrow a tiny bit more to afford that capital, because you will be right at that black line. And so it doesn't impact this fund too much, other than saying more borrowing will be needed at a very tiny rate. You can see just the difference between the blue and the green bars in that bottom right
So,
graph.
so it's basically saying projects that we would have cash funded, instead of cash funding them because we're raising our employees, we would then borrow some of
Yes,
that.
but
Okay.
keep in mind, this projection for the electric fund assumes very minimal available cash for projects. It will rely upon new borrowing going forward after your existing borrowing proceeds are used up.
Okay.
Or an increase in usership.
Right, but yes, but this also assumes, well, it shows that you are going to be able to afford that. You can cover your debt service above 2.0 for the majority of the projection period, which is very excellent coverage. And you would not go into any extraordinary lengths of debt to do this. It'd be recurring debt, yes, to fund your capital program, but you'd be able to afford it with your recurring revenues and maintain debt service coverage ratios.
Are you saying then that we could raise our employees to the appropriate level that work for the electric utility without much pain?
Without much difference than the original plan that we're showing here.
So my question is, how quickly then can we implement the comp and class study for our electric utility workers?
Yeah, we're at there's some bargaining table issues with the IBEW, and remember, they just got a 3% increase, going back to October 1st.
I understand. My
How many people are in
position-
that aren't in comp and class
My-
that are out of whack? I'm sorry, Commissioner.
So I understand that, they got a 3% retroactive,
Yes,
right? Okay.
that's the IBEW.
And I
employees.
understand that even after the 3%, there were many employees there that were still not within the acceptable ranges for
Do we
their
have a number on
salaries.
the number of employees? Where did McShane go?
And so I
I don't know that that's a fair assumption, that's the last statement.
May I clarify? May I try to clarify? Is that 3%, is that 86,000 inclusive after the 3% is applied?
Let's clarify something on bringing people up into the ranges that we're suggesting in these numbers. It doesn't touch all the employees. It's only the employees who are out of the range.
Right.
And they're out of the range at different percentages based on a case-by-case basis. So it would be all over the place, depending upon that employee.
my thing is, I guess, if what we just heard was that basically the electric fund could do this, could come up with the extra $86,000 to
Right.
do right by our employees, not just better, because we've been doing better, but to do right, without much pain, then I guess, my question is, why would we not quickly implement that?
Because we're at the bargaining table.
I wouldn't take the non-IBEW employees that exist in one department and by fund treat them differently from the other employees across the organization. I think if your direction is to implement comp and class and you see that the numbers are acceptable, or if you want to give us direction to look again at some of the expenses to try to make it look, to alter the budget by the time we come back the end of this month, we can do that. We just need some direction from you. But I wouldn't recommend just taking one department and taking PMSA and PEU employees and non-bargaining, and you would create a difficult situation across the organization.
I'm very interested in the difficult situation for many of our employees. And again, I understand that we've been doing better, but we had a conversation here about the difference between, what's better and what's enough. And, my position is that if someone is being underpaid, and we can objectively measure that, we should do our damnedest to get them where they need to be. And I understand that some people in other unions and other funds that might not be in the same financial position might have an issue with that. But I can't see that it's wrong to pay someone who's underpaid what it is that they deserve and what it is that we're able to pay them from the funds that we pay them out of. So I've stated, I would certainly like to see us implement comp and class in the
I-
electric fund if it's possible.
I understand and I agree with you on many levels. The only thing I want to say is that there were it was only a month ago or a month and a half ago where you were all upset because of the way the numbers looked on the electric. You did,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
now
they-
the numbers are here. Let's just, I would suggest that we go with we're just getting the numbers in. We're still in the budget process. We're in the middle of, we still have some negotiations to go. We're in the middle of hurricane season. Let's just, right now, just look at it. We can do anything at any time. And then my question was, I wanted to go back to is that the 3% that we were talking about, again, this $86,000, is that 3% been factored in?
This is above and beyond to get people into the comp. It's irrespective of the 3%.
Because that 3%, the reason I'm asking is because that 3% moves some of those employees into the correct levels.
And again, without the actual
Which I'm
figures
saying,
that
the
Michelle-
reason I'm saying this, please, if I could just finish my thought without everything, is that the 3% moves people into the correct levels, meaning that that number would then go down because some of those employees are now in the comp and class in the right structure. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Provided the employees that got the raise were out of their ranges. Well, I don't know that happened for sure. I mean,
Well, the 3%'s across the board.
to the IBEW
Only to the
employees.
IBEW
To the
employees.
IBEW.
So it was a retroactive increase to the IBEW as members as a part of the wage reopener in their 3-year contract.
And what, in the electric fund, which is the one that we're looking at it, what is the percentage of employees that are not in the IBEW, in the electric?
I don't have the actual percent, I have to look at the machine, but the vast majority are IBEW. There's a smaller percentage of PEU, PMSA, and then some non-represented employees as well.
And
So the 3% increase is only to IBEW, retroactive October 1. Those numbers are in here as a cost of salary. There were only, off the top of my head, my understanding was only a few that fell outside of the comp and class and the total utility, and I don't know if any of those were actually IBEW members.
Gotcha, okay, so if the comp and class.
They may have been
So the 86
non-represented.
only relates to those employees.
To those IBEW
Correct.
employees
Right.
and the people outside.
Right,
Okay.
so we are beginning negotiations, we're exchanging proposals with the IBEW, I believe, on Monday, to start the next contract
And we're
negotiation with
open,
them.
we're having good conversations, we're in a good place. Commissioner Robinson?
A couple things, but first, the Commissioner Hardy was asking about borrowing and salaries. Are we borrowing money to increase salaries? Did I hear?
No, sir, no,
You'd be-
never.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I
It's a
didn't.
practice we
Meaning
wouldn't
taking from
know.
the reserve or taking,
You'd be borrowing money essentially to continue to fund your capital. And actually, you can't quite see it on the screen, but what happens is you start creeping down below the target a little earlier in 2025, because now you've got a little bit of a tiny gap there. So you're just, because you
I
can't
can see
borrow
that.
you can't borrow for O&M expenses. And so you're just borrowing more to fund capital that in, say, 2021, 22 and 23, you were cash funding a slight greater, I guess, portion of your capital.
If you look at that middle graph, that's how your capital is being funded in this projection. The blue at the top of a few of those years, you can see in there 22 and 23, 18 and 19, that's using your operating cash to fund certain projects. The yellow in the early years is your existing loan proceeds that you have in the bank available to use. Where the red bar shows up, that's when we're saying you would need to borrow additional funds to fund your capital projects to that extent. And that's where on that right graph, we're showing every other year, starting in fiscal year 2020, you would have to borrow those amounts to fund your capital projects. When we added in the $86,000 a year going forward, it just means you have a little less operating cash to use to fund projects, so you're gonna have to borrow just a tiny bit more. But if you're borrowing in that green bar 4 million, this is showing you're gonna have to borrow 4.5 million. When it comes to an issue of debt for major capital projects, it's not a whole lot of difference.
Okay.
Commissioner Robinson? Do you have an answer?
The rate of increase, can you give me, is there a number of residential units that we need to reach to get to an estimate that you're talking about?
So are you asking how much more growth you would need to achieve to make it so the numbers are absolutely not different at all than the original forecast?
Good.
Okay. So we're projecting right now about 1%. So go down to Tony, do 1.15. And then shift F9 for me.
1% in overall revenue or?
So that's about another 30 accounts over what we were already
Accounts.
projecting, and then calculate this. We're gonna creep up on this. Now go back and just do 1.25.
Whole attachments. There's like 400 homes? Yeah.
So one good thing to keep in mind is roughly about 200 new accounts per year is what's built into the model. And then we have, based on history and understanding of how much comes on per model, and we validate that based on square footage and numbers of bedrooms and size of units, whether it's attached homes or single-family detached homes. If some of the large developments that are being talked about come online, it has the opportunity to pop these numbers above the 200, roughly 200 per year that we're using in the model right now. But they're all speculative, right? We've seen a lot of folks come through town talking about development in the past, and hopefully some of them do come to fruition, and they'll pop us up above that. Go back to things like pole attachment charges, though, and those recurring steady revenues are very powerful.
And you're negotiating buildings.
We're negotiating those. We're negotiating a lot of things all at the same time.
I'd like to give a lot of credit under Ed's leadership, working with his staff and working with the other departments to create the modeling that hasn't existed before. And Eric knows what we're talking about here. We would say, well, how many units do we think are coming online in these years? And then what's the percentage? They're creating a much more predictive and responsive and rational deep dive into the three areas, both in the city, the unincorporated area, and the village of Palm Springs, to really divine out literally what's happening right now. And we haven't had that level of expertise yet. And so I'm very proud of staff in what Ed's been able to do. So I'm feeling much more confident about those growth numbers being on target. Now, that doesn't mean to say we couldn't have a development come in, and the mayor knows as we meet with different groups of people coming in wanting to do different kinds of projects, you could have a 200-unit project come in fairly quickly, or at least in an 18-month period, so.
Did you have a follow-up?
Well, the Compton class difference in higher pay than lower pay, is that going to be even across the board, or and I'd hate to use the $15 an hour thing, but
This
Are
would,
we gonna be paying anybody
if you
less?
implement comp and class and we work those into the expenses, everybody's brought up, the $15 an hour issue for full-time employees is addressed. It becomes our no pay grade one.
but I'm asking if the rate of increase is the same for everybody.
No,
No.
it can't,
Okay,
that was, and just to make sure we understand that, there's going to be a differential on each case-by-case
Yes.
basis.
A lot of positions there won't be corrected because they're within the range
Right.
based on the study.
And we're not, in this discussion, talking about raising anyone else's salary, just the people who are out of the comp and class range.
And I just, so we're not going to be paying anybody less than $15 an hour.
That's correct.
I would.
And this version, I'm sorry, only includes full-time positions.
And I just,
Additional for part-time.
I just want to say that, the people that work for Lake Worth make Lake Worth what it is, along with its citizen input too, but the leadership in all the departments have made a difference, and it isn't just pay, it's working in the community that I have a sense that is different.
It is. Commissioner Hardy?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that conversation, should the common class study be implemented, everyone would not be treated equally in its implementation, but they would be treated equitably. And that's kind of the idea. So we said that it would take over $300,000 to raise our employees to where we think they should be based on the comp and class study with the general fund. What's the exact amount?
I believe
For the general
for both
fund?
benefits and salaries would be 322,000.
So okay. I don't have a calculator.
322.84.
Yeah, 322.
There's 84 in there.
Okay, so there's still almost $100,000 after you so you start with 590. Okay, so then we got 322 and we got 86,000. There's still almost $100,000 left in that to get our employees where they need to be. Which funds would that come out of?
General fund. Oh, each utility,
Each fund gets an allocation of their own, and so the sanitation fund would have one, the water and sewer would have one, the stormwater would have one. Each one of them gets an allocation.
Which would be the next, so that we can see how that affects each fund?
The next highest would be the electric fund at
Right.
86.
And then the next would be,
Would be the refuse fund at 67,858. Then the beach fund at 62,621. The next highest would be stormwater at 17,698.
can we see how implementing the comp and class study would affect the third most impacted fund? So the first most impacted fund would be the general fund.
Correct.
Second would be the electric fund. The third would be what? Sanitation. did you say?
Yeah, your refuse sanitation.
Okay, and what's the amount for that? And I guess, could we get this in writing via
Yes,
email?
yes, we could.
Okay.
$67,858.
You can see here on the screen, the difference between the green and the blue bars is implementing that $858,000. And our planning period, the 5 years, is very negligible in terms of the impact. We already mentioned that we have concerns about the last 5 years of this.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Could you say that again?
By adding the $858,000 to the sanitation fund,
You said that the impact would be,
negligible in the first 5 years, except over the last 5 years, when that cash flow deficit appears,
Sure.
we would, it would creep up quicker. But
Right.
over this course of this 10-year period, you don't even go below your minimum reserve target without any rate adjustments.
right, and that cash flow deficit appears because your projection shows 0 rate increases for residential, mobile home, and commercial customers.
That's correct. And you could also see,
Right.
starting in 2022, a higher level of capital spending is expected, and that's what really causes the lines to shift.
So it basically has nothing to do, really, or less to do with us implementing the comp and class in this particular fund. It has more to do with.
Anything new.
Okay, so.
That's
my-
such a far outreach.
Right.
So if it's not going to cause a problem if we were to implement this today, I guess my question is, what would delay us from implementing this? I understand that we're in this negotiation, but why can't we just come to our unions with the offer
Well,
of say, hey, we want to make
Let's
you right?
clarify a few things. One, we've only been talking about the next FY in this conversation. To shoehorn it into the current year is something we've not looked at. So that would inflate certain numbers, and we'd have to bring that back to you.
It still has to balance.
At the turn of the fiscal year, October 1st, this would be the impacts.
Okay.
To further clarify.
Can we address it beginning then? I
The
guess what we-
discussions with the unions on this hasn't been carried out in great detail. There's generally been, and I would never speak for the unions, they have their own leadership that comes to the table, but there's generally been more of a desire, as I understand it, to try to do across-the-board increases. This doesn't prohibit you as the commission, as I understand it, from making up this this lack in these positions to bring them up to where they need to be. And I don't think that the union would necessarily say it was a bad thing, but we haven't had discussions on what their view and what their ask is going to be yet.
If we can get our employees to where we've figured out, where we've paid money to figure out where they need to be, I would like to see us be proactive about it and approach them and say, is this something that you guys would oppose if we were to pay you fairly?
I understand where you're going with it, because nobody's been more proactive for the employees again.
Yeah.
We're not coming out of this situation, we're coming out from 3 and 4 years of across the board raises. So, you know what I mean? I mean, whether or not we were in the zone or not in the zone, which has helped us to get it. So we've increased across the board raises for several years. in a time when we were still struggling and flailing. Take into consideration, reconciling the situation with the 20-year plans and the unions, recognizing too that we're just coming out, like, I totally get it, and I love the passion of you and Commissioner Robinson, but you're looking for numbers at 1 week out of a parking structure at the beach and just finally figuring out that we're not completely underwater on a fund. I just urge you both to just remember that I know government works slowly, but at the same time, we're in the middle of hurricane season. We're in the market of a possible, we're in the zone of a possible market correction across real estate and all kinds of things that are happening and that they're talking about. If you're reading the news globally and business reports, we have to be conservative in our approach to doing things and approach them from a very pragmatic way. Do our employees deserve? Yes, they always have and always will. And we will as we make the smart decisions, but we can't drop below levels and we can't be prepared if something happens that is out of our control. So I urge you just to err on the side of caution is my only concern.
Madam,
First, city manager?
No, I just wanted to get the direction, and what I'm hearing, if I can interpret, is that y'all are in agreement to go with the numbers that include bringing the employees up into the comp and class study so that none of the employees are out of their appropriate pay ranges.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's what, as staff, we would advocate for.
Correct.
So,
For-
thank you.
for
Commissioner Hardy?
Thank you. I first want to say that I know that the commissions on which you've served over the past few years have been so much better to our workers than previous commissions. And our workers should be very happy that you and Commissioner Maxwell and Vice Mayor Amoroso made special efforts to do better by them. My point here today, though, is that if we see that we can implement the comp and class study for employees that are being paid out of certain funds, and if the impact to these funds would be, as our professional has told us in his professional opinion, negligible, I don't see why we wouldn't make that effort for the upcoming fiscal year.
I would caution, I did not say anything about negligible in your general fund.
Not in the general fund, right? In the sanitation fund, and also in the electric fund. You said it
Which
wouldn't be
impacts
that.
the general fund.
Right, and I do want to caution, I consider your general fund in a very cautious state right
Yes.
now. You are under your reserve fund balance, and it's going to take over 5 years just to build it up without that comp study. When you do that, it kicks the can down the road another couple of years. So I would be very cautious about your general fund.
I recognize that the general fund is a totally different animal, but for the sanitation fund, which we've looked at, and for the electric fund, we found that it's not impossible, and that it's very possible.
But correct me if I'm wrong, I'm also hearing doing this fund by fund might not be the most wise idea.
Correct. The problem is
It
that
would
it all impacts the general fund. So in the budget process right now, and this just as a point of reference, we're planning now for 19. We're approving this budget for 19. Usually what we do is we sit and we see all those things that we talk about in this budget cycle. What is the growth going to be? Is there going to be an impact when we go through so when we head into the next budget cycle, we say, okay, now we have this information on comp and class. Now we have the ability to look at the numbers and see we did better here, we did worse here. So it comes from our next budget process that we say, okay, hey, let's implement this across the board, or let's do this. We need the period of history to show us if our projections are actually being realized or not, because we don't want to be in a position like we were in 2009 when all the money was going out and the city they weren't making any changes to stop the spending. And the spending was happening and the income wasn't coming in, and we didn't have a break on it, and it went 3 years that pulled us into a pit, a fiery pit. So if we I'm sorry.
Was that a Johnny Cash song?
So if we give fiery pit. So if we give ourselves a chance to actually see that our projections are going in the right direction, then we can follow it up with the budget for the next cycle, or make it retroactive, or do what we did the last time around. But I just, based on history and based on projections and things that are going on in the world, I would say, hold the line and let's just watch for a couple of months. We can always come back and revisit, but watch for a couple of months.
Mr. City Manager, why would this be imprudent to implement this on a fund by fund basis? So for example, if it's easier for certain funds to absorb the cost of the comp and class study implementation than it is for other funds, right? Is it a financial reason why it might be imprudent or a little difficult or a little challenging to implement it on a fund by fund basis, going from the easiest fund to the least easy fund? Or is it more because of the way that we negotiate with our unions?
Well, that obviously plays a factor. I think the unions have representatives or membership across all the funds. We've spent a lot of time, effort, and energy building a culture here that says that the Lake Worth family, we all cross the finish line together or we don't. To allow fund by fund basis to move ahead creates some unnecessary pull and tug on morale, and we don't want any. It would make certain parts of the organization feel like second class citizens, but also I think
all.
I'm sorry.
Rather than all.
Right, and I think.
Well, you know what? We've stood in the trenches together through the worst, and it's getting better, and we stand together as a team. It's been a philosophy. We could discuss that here on the dais as to whether or not we'd have, but it's worked so far.
You also-
we stand together with it. We suffer together.
You also
we grow
create
together.
inconsistencies where you may have a job that literally is in a pay range that's the same, and now you're going to pay that same job. You're going to push it up because they work for that fund. Whereas, so we're going to create those kinds of inconsistencies and inequalities
It'll
as
also
well.
prevent an across the board raise that we've done in the past several years, which means all the people that are not affected by IBW or PMA and PMS.
We also have a potential here under the current system with this inequality of having people out of their pay ranges, of new people coming in and
No,
being
but
paid.
I just want to repeat
Yeah.
what I was saying, even though I sounded incoherent at the end, with my initials. The thing about it is, again, the employees that aren't, that aren't in the unions, that aren't getting this raise, or they aren't in this, or they aren't in that, or they're on a lower end of the range that's not affected by the comp and class. So if you initiate comp and class, and the same person who's been making X amount of dollars for years is not getting anything. They're not getting any raise. Or how about somebody new that starts at a higher rate than the guy next to him who's worked here for 30 years and is only making $19 an hour, and now he's got a new employee just coming in with a lot less experience who's making $15 an hour, and he's been there for 40 years or 30 years or 20 years or whatever it may. There's a certain level where the formulas don't work for everybody, and we're trying to smooth it to the point where everybody benefits, as opposed to.
Madam Mayor,
I don't know how better to explain it.
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Hardy, what's your reticence in doing it in?
What's
the-
my
the
reticence
funds?
in waiting?
In pulling out one of the funds and saying, don't do it in this fund? What's your?
I'm not at all reticent to implement the comp and class study wherever we can. I'm not saying, for example, with the general fund, there's a $300,000 figure amount that would be very difficult to do. I'm not saying that we should rush to implement it there. But in other funds where it's more doable, I think we should try to do it. And
But don't every fund impact the general fund in some capacity?
In some sense.
Madam Mayor?
In some sense, yes, but in the sense that, will it negative, so let me ask you, the electric fund impacts the general fund because the electric fund pays a contribution into the general fund. But if we were to raise our employees who are beneath the acceptable ranges that we've determined according to the comp and class study, if we were to raise them where they need to be in the electric fund, would that negatively affect the general fund?
The revenues affect the general fund from the electric fund.
Correct.
But let me just state this for the record of the electric fund. This is the first time I've sat in this room where that fund has looked okay in a while.
Exactly.
I would feel uncomfortable making any extra effort to apply any cost pressure on that fund until I see it come out of its hole where it's meeting its reserve fund balance.
Thank you.
And it's not there yet.
What about for the sanitation fund?
Sanitation fund could do it, but you're gonna go over to that fund, please, Leticia. What it does show is that come 5+ years from now, you're gonna have to start talking about rate increases in this fund, and that rate increase is gonna be a tougher decision than it would have otherwise been.
And now, an alternative to a huge rate increase 5 years out would be to just slowly, in small amounts, increase rates every year. So it doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, there's blood in the water 5 years from now.
That's true.
You could very slowly
that is a
rip off the Band-Aid.
possibility. And if I'm looking at this independently, and I would say you could possibly apply it to the sanitation fund, and with the understanding that you may need to creep up on rate increases sooner than later. If you're comfortable with that, in doing it in an isolated fund and not the rest of your funds and whatever issues that may create internally, then I'm looking at a fund that the picture does not change a whole lot. But when it comes to the electric fund and the general fund in particular, I'd be very cautious with that general fund to implement this study right now.
That I understand. Look, it's just, I think, maybe my perspective's a little different.
You haven't been through enough of the really scary scenarios that we've been through. We're finally just getting there to a point where we have enough money that we're not stealing from reserves too much money. We're not, we're getting to a proper organization, and I just don't want to tilt the wheel. Well, we're finally just getting there. That's my only concern, and it certainly is. And I don't want to appear that I don't want to give our employees. I sort of don't like this position you're putting me in, because it makes me look like a bad guy to a bunch of people that I've been standing up and supporting and trying to do really well for a long time. So, City Manager, do you have something?
Well, if your desire is to do comp and class across all the funds, which we're highly
That is
recommending,
the goal.
let us look at these increases as they are being pushed into the expense side, and come back and re-examine the budgets in those areas and see if we can find some potential savings.
Yeah, I just want to make my position clear. My position is not that we should, in the upcoming fiscal year, implement the comp and class study across every single fund. My position is that we should determine which funds are able to absorb the increase in cost of the comp and class study implementation, and implement the comp and class study for the employees within those funds. And I understand that there might be some relative inequities, right? But there is still, the status quo is generally inequitable, right? So like some employees might say, hey, you work for this fund, you got a raise, I didn't, we do similar jobs. But right now they're all saying to their buddies who work in this city that we do similar jobs and you're getting paid more. So obviously because of scarcity, we're having to make decisions that we're trying to choose the least bad outcome. Someone is going to not feel great if they see their buddy in another fund get a raise, but at the end of the day, that buddy is getting what he's deserving, and the commitment would be that in the future we're going to work on you too. And I just don't see, if a fund like the sanitation fund is able to absorb it, why would we delay if we can do it? I just
So just to clarify, so you want to do
we
it?
have no plan to implement it in the upcoming
Yes, we
fiscal
do.
year, do we?
Yes.
For the sanitation fund, we have a plan to implement it. So
All
why?
across the board. You're
These-
saying now
We
in
just said that was excluded from the budget.
These toggles, no, you said in the current fiscal year is the only time I heard that.
Yeah.
In the last
These-
meeting we had,
What year are you talking
These
about?
toggles show it in each fund. Is that correct?
We turn them on and off.
you turn it right. The
Correct.
original position was that they were off, correct?
They were.
Right. So they were not baked into these.
Turn them on.
Right. So we started
Right.
in the general fund talking about it because it's the biggest fund, and we said it doesn't include this item. And that prompted the discussion, well, what does it look like across all the funds? Because our intention would be to, if you're going to do it in the general fund, do it across all the funds.
Correct.
So I apologize for the confusion on that,
Correct,
Commissioner.
me too.
So are you saying when you gave us the presentation about the electric fund, that included an implementation of the comp and class? It did not.
No.
Okay, so what you're saying is that for the upcoming fiscal year, we had no plan to implement the study.
We asked them just for a presentation methodology to put it on a toggle so that when we got to the general fund, we said, What's not included, by the way, is the comp and class study. And we want to show you what it looks like, because the general fund has always been the problematic fund of all the different ones. And if you're going to do the general fund, obviously you're going to go back and do the other funds. And that's why now you can toggle and see the electric, you can see sanitation. I apologize, I understand now. I couldn't get my mind around what you were trying, your point. We didn't not show it in the electric or sanitation fund because we didn't want to do it. We just waited to talk about it until the general fund. Does that make sense?
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have a plan to implement comp and class in the upcoming fiscal year.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't
Sorry.
have a disagreement.
No, we're
No.
arguing over our
Over the current
non-disagreement.
From a different approach.
Yeah.
It's a horse of a different color.
So we are planning to come up with the extra $300,000 in the general
If you
fund?
give us the direction to move forward with implementation, we will do it across all the funds and come back to you by the August 28th budget meeting with how that would look.
Let's do it.
But then then we all vote on it to see where we're at based on the final numbers that come in at the end of the budget. But the last section, as I said, this budget process is a process. You have to get to each one, but that comes to a vote as to whether or not we can afford to do that in all the funds.
Because remember the last time you saw Stantec, these funds were in their very early developmental stages and they were pretty skewered. And we've
Look how
been
they've
honing
changed so
them.
far. I mean, just with the proper information being input into them. So in our projections, okay.
Okay.
Sheesh,
That was easy. That was easy.
okay. What's next?
That's all we have.
There you go.
That was it.
That's all, folks. I'll entertain a motion. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Robinson.
I was, wanted to hear two things. I'd like to hear from the state sustainability, whether 200 is a good projection or not in terms of growth.
Can you put your microphone up?
Yeah.
Your belly button isn't talking.
I hear it sometimes.
That's a funny mental picture.
William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. 200 units coming online, and I think the projection, and Ed can correct me if I'm wrong, is across the entire electric utility service area. That's not just for Lake Worth itself. We have already in the works right now approvals, requests for over 200 units that have not already been entitled. There's a backlog of over 400 units that have been entitled that have not come out of the ground yet. And discussions.
In Lake Worth or in Palm
Lake
Springs?
Worth. The Planning and Zoning Board just next month in site plan review in September. In October, we'll hear two projects that combined are over 400 units.
In Lake Worth?
In Lake Worth, the city of Lake Worth. So having 200 seems rather conservative. And we have not met that in some years, we've exceeded it in others.
And appreciate in the modeling that electric utilities developed until such time as there's certainty they're underway and they'll be permitted within a certain fiscal year. We are not counting them towards actual units coming online, even
Were we
though
acting
they would be in the process.
overestimating from the year?
We're being as accurate as possible about when they come online. So lead time is an important part of the development process.
And oftentimes the effect on the electric fund will precede the effect on the general fund because the CO has to be issued by the end of the year to affect the tax rate for the following year.
And the other question was the golf course. What fund is that in?
The leisure services fund.
Is there numbers to,
I'm not aware of golf
There's
course.
not, we did not ask them to model the golf course. Is there specific?
well, just the expense versus the income?
Are you teeing up a question?
I'm putting.
The golf course.
Wake up, Juan.
Wake up. Golf course wasn't included in the numbers that we saw, or was it in the?
In the comp and class?
No.
No,
the-
in the
general
budget
fund,
numbers.
Income and expense.
The budget numbers. We didn't see any numbers. We usually see a breakdown of the golf course. We didn't see a breakdown of the golf course this budget cycle.
Well, for FY19, the projections that it covers its expenses. And as we all know, as we've talked about in the past, the golf course hinges on Mother Nature, very similar to parking rates. So this year, we're still tracking a forecast for a slight
We charge
loss.
for parking there?
Huh? For a slight loss due to weather-related loss of revenue, and FY19 was like a break-even operation.
City manager? I thought you were stepping up like you were gonna say something.
I'm always excited to talk about the golf course, but I'll refrain.
Okay.
It frightens me.
Appreciate this. I'll
excited.
make this one statement about the golf course. Like every other asset or infrastructure in the city of Lake Worth, because it wasn't significantly maintained and invested appropriately over time and refurbished, it teeters on a knife's edge, balancing on expenses and revenues. And as it continues to deteriorate, its profitability, its ability to draw rounds appropriately, its ability to recover after a rain event so that it clears and people can play, affects its ability to function. And it's directly reflected over the years of benign neglect, just like the roads, just like the electric transmission, everything else. So until we figure out how to fix that, that business model is going to continue to teeter on that knife's edge. And it's a hard thing to manage. It's amazing that we get as close as we do.
Yeah.
And not everybody completely understands or appreciates
And
these
so was at
comments.
the last minute too, with the numbers.
Yeah.
And if I may, thank you, city manager. If to monetize what he just said, we're losing on average every year $60,000 to $80,000 in booked tee times that have to be refunded due to rain because the course is underwater. We know we're not draining. So
And that would be standard across the industry, though.
Because it's
No.
because it's
No.
raining or because
No.
we're
No.
underwater.
because we're underwater, because our infrastructure doesn't drain properly. We
It's-
can't move water off the course.
It's so
quick enough.
close to the water table, it stays wet for too long, which affects the play. You can't refresh in the day that it rained.
Laid out.
And also the fish on the golf cart paths are
And-
just,
That's always fun.
And it compounds because we get our worst tides, our worst rains. It seems
In the
like
good season.
during season
Yeah.
when we have peak rates, so the impact is felt double painful. But again, to the city manager's point, it's an asset that we need to talk about down the road.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second?
All those in favor state so by saying aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody.
thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, we appreciate it. Thank you, staff.
too.
Thanks, Stantec guys, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Stantec.